On today's episode of Home Media Minefield, I'm going to be looking at the Blu-ray release of Roadgames coming up. Hello, I'm Keith and welcome to Home Media Minefield, helping you with information to navigate the complexities of home cinema and home media entertainment. And in today's episode, I'm going to be looking at the Powerhouse Indicator series release of Roadgames, the 1981 Richard Franklin Australian thriller. Now, this has been released on Blu-ray before. It's been released in the US under the Shout Factory label and in Australia under Umbrella Entertainment. And this is where it is a little bit of a minefield, because in terms of special features and packaging, there are slight differences between all three releases. But this Indicator Series Collector's Edition does indeed have substantial amount of extras and comes nicely packaged with a booklet and poster. Now, I've previously done an unboxing video on this to show off and highlight those things. Suffice to say that the version that I showed is limited to 5,000 copies. However, Powerhouse Indicator tend to make the actual Blu-ray available even once the limited edition is gone. So you'll still get the same disc with all of the special features and main cover, but what you don't get would be the 90-page booklet, the poster, and the hard case that it all comes in. So I will put a link down below. It is still available at the moment and worth picking up if you like this. But as I said, if you're finding this video much later, then I'm sure that Indicator, they do tend to continue the series on what I'm going to review today. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so first up with the picture quality on this. This Blu-ray has been taken from a 4K scan of the negative. It is presented in its full 235:1 aspect ratio. Previous versions had been cropped down to a 178, so they've got that right. And the cleanup on this picture looks great. They haven't gone with any digital noise reduction, which does mean that you get some grain, because obviously this was originally shot on film and the high def does pull that out. But it looks really good, and the colours have been graded to look very natural. So I'm sure compared to previous DVD and Blu-ray releases, this one will keep home media enthusiasts happy. Right, onto the audio side, and this is where it's a little bit complicated. The only audio available on this is a 1.0 mono track, which was the original soundtrack that it was released in. Now, looking at some of the other copies that you can get out there, like the Shout Factory and the Umbrella Entertainment, it says on the documentation that it includes a 5.1 audio mix. Now, I suspect that to be a typo, and the reason I say that is in one of the commentaries by Richard Franklin, they talk about the cleanup that had been done for what was then the DVD release. And they talk about the fact that they've done a good job of cleaning up the audio. However, they do say that a 5.1 mix wasn't available because the assets from the original mix of that simply didn't exist. It wasn't mixed that way in post-production. So it does leave me with a question mark as to whether or not a 5.1 remastering has been done at some point. But for the purists out there, this includes the original soundtrack, essentially. The important thing is there aren't any pops or noise on it, and you can hear everything clearly, even though it is only a mono soundtrack. I hope that makes sense. These things can get a little complicated. I will continue to investigate to see if the other releases do indeed have a 5.1 mix. But for the Indicator series here, it is mono, and Indicator normally go to town on this stuff, so I'm assuming that that is what is available. Now onto the special features, and like I said up front, there are a few different features on some of the other releases. However, the hours upon hours of bonus material that you get on this is extremely comprehensive, and I think anybody would be hard pushed to find more information on this film. Between the previous releases and what has been done for this Indicator series release, they really have pulled together an incredible amount of information and presented it well in this package, especially considering that this is a 1981 low-budget Australian film. The sheer amount of information that's included on this disc is impressive. Now first up, you get a 2003 audio commentary that was done for the Anchor Bay DVD release with director Richard Franklin. Now Richard does go into a ton of detail about this movie and talks incredibly enthusiastically about the whole thing. Now, as much as Brian De Palma is often known as the American director that homages Alfred Hitchcock and everything, Richard Franklin has to be the Australian equivalent and absolutely freely admits his love and influence of the great Alfred Hitchcock. He talks about this film as very much being Rear Window in a truck. He talks about the fact that people often get thrillers confused with horror, and talks through all the complications of a production such as this, and how unfortunately, because of some miscommunication about the completion bond, the final chase scene that he had to be reduced quite a bit in the final version. He talks about working with the distributor for the release and how they had to go back and film an extra stinger for the end of the film to make it more marketable, etc. It really is a detailed, comprehensive commentary. Now the second commentary is a 2019 recorded commentary hosted by Mark Hartley, who did the Not Quite Hollywood documentary, which is quite an interesting one to seek out if you haven't seen it, and features crew members Vincent Monton, who was the cinematographer, Helen Watts, who was the production coordinator, and costume designer Aphrodite Condas. Now this is a very candid commentary, and in some ways contradicts some of the things from the Richard Franklin commentary. Whilst they all agree that Richard Franklin himself was extremely well organised, with every single scene storyboarded to great detail, they do say that the production itself was less so organised. They talk about how they didn't have a second unit on this film, and the money that was wasted by the first unit sticking around for all of the second unit inserts and stunt work. They talk about how difficult it was to actually film this on the road, and how rear projection really saved them when it came to the truck and cab scenes. And they actually argue amongst themselves, as they all remember things very differently in the 40 years since they actually made this film. But there is, again, lots of information in here, and it is quite a fun and refreshing conversation. Well worth a listen. Also on this Indicator release, you get a third audio commentary from the Final Girls, who are a duo of critics that look at the intersection between horror and feminism in films. Now this is a much more analytical commentary, but again contains lots of information on the genre and the making of this film, and really does show you how different attitudes were back then when viewed through today's lens. I think between the three commentaries that you get on this set, you do get a really balanced look at the overall production and the overall themes of this film. Next up, you get a 20-minute featurette from 2003 called Kangaroo Hitchcock, The Making of Roadgames. And this essentially features interviews with Richard Franklin and Stacy Keach on the making of the film. Now, there is quite a lot of repetition from what you actually hear in the audio commentaries here, but Richard Franklin does talk fondly about how he reached out to Alfred Hitchcock when he was a film student and how he eventually got to meet the man. And they also go through the entire production here. It's really nice to hear from Stacy Keach as well, who tells his individual story of this and his thoughts and insights into the film and working with Jamie Lee Curtis. You then get nearly 90 minutes worth of audio interviews. So these are with a black screen, and they range from interviews from 1981 through to 2016 and feature Richard Franklin, Stacy Keach and stunt coordinator Grant Page. Now again, yes, there's repetition here, but there's also a lot of other interesting details and information along the way. There's also over an hour's worth of camera interviews from the 2008 documentary Not Quite Hollywood, which feature Jamie Lee Curtis, Stacy Keach, Richard Franklin and other cast and crew members. Next up as well, you get a rare 2-hour lecture with director Richard Franklin, producer Barbie Taylor and music composer Brian May. Now this is 4:3 standard definition, is clearly taken from videotapes that was recorded at a college lecture, but they really do delve deep into the entire process and business of producing a film like this. Now it's fascinating that this even exists. This was recorded in 1981 at a college lecture. But absolutely fantastic that it's been preserved and included on this special edition. You then get a 15-minute 2020 recorded featurette called Trouble Ahead with film professor and historian Neil Sinyard. Now Neil talks not just about this film but Richard Franklin's career and the impact that this film had. He talks about the very unusual tone that this film has that sort of mixes a road movie with a thriller with a screwball comedy, and how Quentin Tarantino often cites it as being his favourite Australian film, but actually argues whether this is a typical Australian film or not. He analyses the impact of this film and how the actual trailer, for example, didn't really reflect the tone of the film, but instead tried to market it as a slasher horror type movie. Again, even though this is short, it does provide some new information as well and a different viewpoint. Next up, you get an audio-only recording from 1980 of the script read-through. Now again, this is quite fascinating because you do get questions as to the characters' motivations and backstory while they're reading through this, and is quite a fun and intriguing listen. You then get some Brian May music demos included on this, the aforementioned theatrical trailer, as well as an image gallery with over 100 stills. And then finally on this package you get the 1973 short film And His Ghost May Be Heard, which is a quirky little film that Richard Franklin did when he was at film school. And that basically rounds it up, although there's a hell of a lot to get through on there. So hopefully I've intrigued you enough to go ahead and maybe want to check this out. So in terms of scoring for this, for the picture on this, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. They really have done a great job at the cleanup and remastering of this picture. And even though it's not 4K, with HDR, it is still a decent Blu-ray. I can only give the audio a 2 out of 5, unfortunately, because even though it is the original mono soundtrack and it is cleaned up nicely, there is no 5.1 mix that people come to expect nowadays on home media, particularly high def. But the special features on this, I'm going to give a full 5 out of 5. There literally is hours of bonus material on this, whether it be audio or old video. Absolutely everything you can imagine is included in this package, along with 3 audio commentaries. So that gives overall a respectable 11 out of 15. Powerhouse Indicator have indeed done a fabulous job with this release. The movie itself, I didn't actually remember it, to be honest, but I did find it a highly entertaining film, and it's well worth checking out. So that brings me to the end of another home media minefield. If indeed you did find this information useful, then please do hit the like button, consider subscribing to the channel, and hit that bell icon so that you don't miss anything moving forward. I do publish unboxings and reviews weekly. If there's anything in particular that you'd like me to look at, then please do put that down in the comments and I will see if I can get it added to the schedule. But in the meantime, I thank you for your time today and I will speak to you at the next Home Media Minefield. Bye for now.